Good day everyone. I am Geraldine Mataya and today I will discuss to you the implementing a curriculum daily in classroom. Let's have first the desired learning outcomes. The first one is review the components of daily plan for teaching. The second one is identify intended learning outcomes. And the last one is match learning outcomes with appropriate teaching methods. So, a teaching activity is like implementing a mini-skill curriculum. A daily lesson. A daily lesson is based on the plan or written curriculum which will be put or implemented by the teacher in the classroom. And according to the DepEd Order number 70, Series 2012, teachers of all public elementary and secondary schools will not be required to prepare detailed lesson plans. So they may adopt daily lesson logs which contain the needed information and guide from the teacher guide and teacher manual reference material with page number. Intervention given to the students and remarks to the indicate how many students have mastered the lesson or are needing remediation. So, however, teachers with less than 2 years of teaching experience shall be required to prepare daily lesson plans which shall include the following. The first one is the objective, the next one is the subject matter, the third one is the procedure, the fourth one is the assessment, and the last one is the assignment. So as prospective teachers, we should prepare lesson plans that will comply with the necessary components asked by the Department of Education. So those who will be employed in the private schools may have a different lesson plan format, but the fundamental parts will be the same. This DepEd Order number 70 series of 2012, it is a set forth guidelines on the preparation of daily lessons. It says that teachers who have been in the service for more than 2 years, a private school experience is included, shall not be required to prepare a detailed lesson plan. So let's have the content focus, which is the laying down the curriculum plan. So before the class begins every day, a teacher must have written a lesson plan. So the main parts of lesson plan are the objective or the intended learning outcomes or the ELO. The second one is the subject matter. The third one is the procedure or strategies of teaching. The fourth one is assessment of learning outcomes, and the last one is assignment or agreement. So let's have first the intended learning outcomes or the objectives, where these are the desired learning that will be focus of the lesson. So learning outcomes are based on a taxonomy of objective presented for us as cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. So Bloom's taxonomy has been revisited by his own student. So those are the Lauren Anderson and David Cratwall. So let us study both in the comparison. Somehow the two are similar, however, the highest level of the cognition in the revised version is creating. So while in the original is the evaluation. So take note that the original version is stated as nouns while the revised version is stated as verbs. So which imply more active form of thinking. Where in original version of Bloom's taxonomy 1956, we have knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. While in revised Bloom's by Anderson 2001, we have remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So in revised Bloom's taxonomy, there are three major changes. So these are number one, changing the names in the six categories from nouns to verbs. The next one is rearranging these categories. The last one is establishing the levels of the knowledge level in the original version. Let us study the cognitive categories with the example keywords for each in new version of taxonomy. The first category is remembering. It is recall or retrieve previous learned information. The example of this is the student can name the different states of matter. The appropriate learning outcome verbs for this level include defines, describes, identifies, labels, lists, outlines, selects, and states. The next category is understanding. Comprehend meaning, translation, state problem in own words, and making meaning. The example of this is the students can explain how typhoons are formed. And the appropriate learning outcome verbs for this level include comprehends, explains, distinguishes, estimates, gives examples, interprets, predicts, rewrites, and summarizes. The third category is applying. Use concept in new situation and applies what has been learned in new situation. The example of this is the students can solve problems involving linear algebraic equation. And the appropriate learning outcome verbs for this level include applies, changes, computes, operates, constructs, modifies, uses, manipulates, prepares, shows, and solves. The fourth category is analyzing. Separate materials or concepts into component parts so that the organization is clear. So distinguishes between facts and inferences. So the example of this is the students can differentiate techniques in holding a badminton racket. The appropriate learning outcome verbs for this level include breaks down, compares, contrasts, diagrams, differentiates, discriminates, identifies, infers, outlines, relates, selects, and separates. The fifth one is evaluating. Make judgment about the value of ideas or materials. The example of this is the students can evaluate their logic programs based on Boolean algebra. The appropriate learning outcome verbs for this level include appraises, compares, criticizes, defends, describes, discriminates, evaluates, interprets, justifies, and summarizes. The last category is creating. Build a structure or pattern from various elements, put parts together to create a whole to make new meaning and structure. The example of this is the students can compile different local recipes that uses chicken as the main ingredient. The appropriate learning outcome verbs for this level include composes, compiles, designs, generates, modifies, organizes, rearranges, reorganizes, revises, rewrites, summarizes, and creates. In writing objectives or intended learning outcomes, it is always recommended that more of higher order thinking skills should be developed and less of the low-level thinking skills for learners. So the low-level categories will develop the low-level thinking skills and the thinking skills progress as the categories move higher. Let's talk the levels of knowledge. The first one is factual knowledge. It is the ideas, specific data, or information. It is also refers to the basic information that the students must know to be acquainted with a discipline or solve problems with it. So the example of it is knowledge of terminology or specific details. The second one is conceptual knowledge. Words or ideas known by common name, common features, multiple specific example which may either be concrete or abstract. A concept are facts that interrelate with each other to function together. It is also refers to the knowledge of or understanding of concepts, principles, theories, models, and classifications. So we learn conceptual knowledge through reading, viewing, listening, experiencing, or thoughtful, reflective mental activity, and so on. The third level of knowledge is procedural knowledge. This is how things work or step-by-step actions and also methods of inquiry. So it is basically how you know to do something or perform a specific skill or task. And the last one is metacognitive knowledge. It is a knowledge of cognition in general, awareness of knowledge of one's own cognition or thinking about thinking. It is also refers to what learners know about learning. So the learner's knowledge of their own cognitive abilities and the learner's knowledge of particular task. And it include planning how to approach a learning task. The intended learning outcomes should be written in a SMART way. SMART stands for specific, measurable, attainable, result-oriented, and time-bound. The subject matter or the content comes from a body of knowledge, the facts, the concepts, the procedure, and metacognition that will be learned through the guidance of the learner. The subject matter is what in teaching. In a plan, this is followed by the references. So the next one is procedure or methods and strategies. So this is the crux of curriculum implementation. How a teacher will put life to the intended outcomes and subject matter to be used depends on this component. In short, the subject matter content is an integration of facts, concepts, principles, hypotheses, theories, and laws, thinking skills, manipulative skills, values, and attitudes. So our subject matter content includes cognitive skills and affective components. There are many ways of teaching for the different kinds of learners. So Corpus and Salandanan 2013 enumerated the following approaches and methods, which may be useful for the different kinds of learners. Some are time-tested methods, while others are non-conventional constructivist methods. The first one is direct demonstration method. So it is direct instruction in way of teaching which aim at helping students acquire some basic skills and procedural knowledge. It is straightforward and is done in a step-by-step manner. The emphasis is on how they execute the steps of the entire procedure. The guided exploratory discovery approach, or also known as discovery teaching and discovery learning. So it is commonly used in higher level thinking. So this method helps the students to learn how to ask questions, seek answers, or solutions to the problems. So inquiry approach relies heavily on ability of the both teachers and students to discuss. The inquiry method. So the inquiry method is a student-centered learning approach with the concept of the students who are actively involved in the teaching and learning activity under the monitoring and supervision of teachers. So the inquiry method requires higher order thinking skills and critical thinking to make conclusions. The problem-based learning. So it is a teaching styles that pushes students to become the drivers of their learning educations. So problem-based learning uses complex, real-world issues as the classroom subject matter, encouraging students to develop problem-solving skills and learn concepts instead of just absorbing facts. The last part is the project method. So, teacher-facilitated collaborative approach in which students acquire and apply knowledge and skills to define and solve realistic problems using a process of extended inquiry. The second one is cooperative learning approach, where this approach which aims to organize classroom activities into to academic and social learning experiences. So the teacher's role changes from giving information to facilitating students' learning. So everyone succeed when the group succeed. So the next one is peer tutoring, where it is an instructional strategy that uses students to provide academic assistance to struggling peers. So peer tutoring may use students from the same classroom or pair older students with younger struggling students. And also the Learning Action Cell, where a group of teachers who engage in collaborative learning session to solve shared challenges encountered in a school that facilitated by the school head or the designated leader. So the importance of Learning Action Cell are to improve the teaching learning process that will lead to improved learning among the students, and also to nurture successful teachers and enable teachers to support each other to continuously improve their content. The third one is the inductive and deductive approach, where the deductive reasoning works from the more general to more specific, while the inductive reasoning works the other way, so moving from specific observation to broader generalization and theories. And also the project method and the inquiry-based learning. So it promotes engagement, curiosity, and experimentation. So students are empowered to explore subject by asking questions and finding or creating solutions. So it more a philosophy and general approach to education than a strict set of rules and guidelines. And the other approaches are blended learning, where it design of course that enhances the teaching and learning experiences for the students and teachers by combining face-to-face learning activities with online learning components. And the reflective teaching, where it involves examining one's underlying beliefs about teaching and learning and one's alignment with actual classroom practice before, during, and after a course is taught. So when teaching reflectively, instructors think critically about their teaching and look for evidence of effective teaching. And also the integrated learning, an approach where the learner brings together prior knowledge and experiences to support new knowledge and experiences. By doing this, learners draw on their skills and apply them to new experiences at a more complex level. And the last approach is the outcome-based approach, where in this approach to program and course design, teaching and learning that is focused on what the students are expected to learn and do, so rather than on what the teachers expect to teach. The purpose of this is to be flexible, empowerment-oriented approach to learning. So those are the different ways of teaching for the different kinds of learners. But teachers have to take into consideration that the different strategies should match with the learning styles of the students. Then we all know naman na students have different learning styles. So there are many classification of learning styles according to the different authors. So the multiple intelligence theory of Howard Gardner implies several learning styles. So but for our lesson, we will just focus on the three learning styles, which are the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So these three preferred styles can help teachers choose the method and the materials that they will be used. Let's have first the visual. It uses graphs, charts, pictures, tends to remember things that are written in form. So tips for teachers about learners, Um, we turn notes into pictures, diagrams, or maps. Then learn the big picture first, then details, and make mind maps and concept maps. The next one is the auditory. It recalls information through hearing and speaking, and prefers to be told how to do things orally and learns aloud. So the tips for teachers about learners is to record lectures and listen to this. Then repeat materials out loud and read aloud. The last one is the kinesthetic. It prefers hands-on approach. It demonstrates how to do rather than explain. Likes group work with hands-on minds on. So the tips for teachers about learners is learn something while doing another things like uh, eating while studying. Then work while standing like field work. And also do many things at one time. The teaching and learning must be supported by instructional materials. So considering the teaching methodologies and learning styles. So the different support materials should be varied. So this will be ensured and the individual differences will be considered. The instructional materials should be complement either visual, auditory, and tactile or a combination of three. So however, the following Dale's cone of learning, which is a visual device, can help teachers to make decisions on what resources and materials will maximize learning. This Dale's cone is one of the most important theoretical foundation that makes connection between concrete and abstract ideas, which is the one of the main principles of teaching and learning. It is also help the professional to select media on the basis of the experiences aimed to transfer students. So it cures that learners retain more information by what they do as opposed to what is heard, read, or observed. The lower levels of a child brain must be developed first before they can move on to more complicated learning topics. So, what instructional support materials will be the teacher use according to the learning style and the outcome to be achieved? So, here are some guidelines. The first guideline is use of direct purposeful experience through learning by doing retains almost all of the learning outcomes. So 90% of learning is retained. Examples are field trip, field study, community immersion, and practice teaching. The second guideline is participation in the class activities, discussion, reporting, and similar activities where learners have the opportunity to talk and write. So 70% of learning is remembered. So examples are small group discussion, buzz session, individual reporting, role playing, and panel. The third guideline is passive participation as in watching a movie, viewing exhibit, watching demonstration will retain around 50% of what has been communicated. The fourth one is by just looking at still pictures, paintings, illustrations, and drawings will allow the retention of around 30% of the material content. The fifth one is by hearing as in lecture, sermon, monologues, that only 20% is remembered. And the last one is reading, that will ensure 10% remembering of the material. Regardless of the amount of remembering from the concrete to abstract. So each layer contributes to learning and requires instructional support materials. Like in visual, in concrete, it includes flat, three-dimensional realized models, and etc. Or in abstract, it includes verbal, symbols, or either words. While in audio, include recordings of sounds, natural or artificial. In audiovisual, include combination of what can be seen and heard. In kinesthetic, it is manipulated materials like modeling clay, rings, dumbbells, equipments, and others. And lastly, the experimental that utilize all modalities and finding out what has been achieved or assessing achieved outcomes. So at the end of the activity, the teacher will find out if the intended learning outcomes has been converted in achieved learning outcomes. So tests and other tools are utilized at the end of the lesson to identify this. So what knowledge, process understanding, and performance are demonstrated by the learners. So the rule of thumb is what has been taught should be measured. To find out if the intended outcome set at the beginning has been achieved. So more detailed discussion will be found in the module of evaluation of the curriculum. Remember that a teaching activity is like implementing a minuscule curriculum. So a daily lesson is based on a plan or written curriculum which will be put to action by the teacher in classroom. So before the lesson ends, the teacher must find out if the students have truly learned. Let's have my take action. So what is my learning style? So I study the learning style choice board and I check as many as I feel that I want to do more often. So I choose three learning styles that I feel that I belong with physical or kinesthetic where I do create a game, do an experiment, construct a model, build a representation, and create a sport. The next style that I want or I belong with logical or mathematical, where I create a code, make a timeline, compare, contrast ideas, create a outline, design a map, show a pattern, and teach concept mapping. And the last style that I am belong with, social, where I tell stories or poems, survey others, interview someone, teach a cooperative game, uh, a role play, and hold discussion. I want to say that I have a multiple learning style as a individual. And the last part of this topic is the activities that we need to do. The first one is the self-check that contains 10 questions that we need to recall and provide the answers to what is asked in each item. And also the self-reflect that we will reflect and answer the statement based on what we learn in this lesson. And now my report is over. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.